Blind Citizens Australia proudly presents the Entrepreneurial Mindset webinar series, brought to you in partnership with Vision Australia. Webinar 2. So you have this idea, where to from here?
We begin our webinar this evening by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands on which we are all meeting today. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people of Australia. As we gather for this physically dispersed meeting, let us take a moment to reflect upon the meaning of place, and in doing so, recognise the various traditional lands upon which we gather today. Before we begin, just some general housekeeping. Tonight's webinar topic is So You Have This Idea, Where to From Here? And we'll cover the business basics for aspiring business owners who are blind or vision impaired. This is the second of 6 webinars in the BCA, the Entrepreneurial Mindset webinar series, delivered in partnership with Vision Australia. If you missed the first webinar, the Entrepreneurial Mindset, an introduction, a recording can be accessed via an I for Business page on the BCA and I to the Future website. You can also sign up for the remaining webinars at Humanitix and by searching the Entrepreneurial Mindset webinar series, or by contacting BCA on 1800 033 660. Finally, for all those present, we have a special offer from Small Business Australia for any currently registered small business owners in attendance today. Please stay tuned at the end of the webinar for more details. That completes our housekeeping for tonight's webinar. I'll now hand over to Dino for our panel discussion. Thank you, Dino.
Thanks very much, Nicole, and welcome everyone. I'm delighted being here on the land of the Wurundjeri people to be the facilitator for tonight's discussion, looking at some of the basic business issues for budding entrepreneurs, particularly those who are blind or have low vision. I'm joined by Alex Solo, proprietor of and founder of Sprint Law, who will be our subject matter expert, and Amanda Heel, who is a public speaker, a coach and an author who has experience in setting up her own business. We'll draw upon that as the discussion goes on. I think the starting point, if I may, is just to reflect on the fact that both Alex and Amanda are lawyers, and I'm a lawyer as well. So we've got a surfeit of lawyers on the panel tonight. Probably won't surprise you that I start with a disclaimer. Obviously, what we're talking about tonight is general advice, and individuals would need to get their own specific advice if they get issues that are of, if they feel they need some legal advice on something. But with that said, I turn to perhaps, like most lawyers, my favourite topic, which is a little bit of description of myself. I have low vision. My lived experience with low vision started from when I was very young. I experienced significant difficulties about 25 years ago, and my vision has declined ever since. I can no longer read and use most of the technologies that we're familiar with to convey and to obtain information. I've been a partner of PwC, one of the big 4 accounting firms. I've been head of tax for an international, multinational organisation based in Hong Kong. And over the last 11 years, I've been the proprietor of a small consulting business based in Melbourne, advising investors in Asia. During that time, I've had to deal with all of the issues of being a small business owner, including, you know, how do I set my business up? Where do I get printer for my toner for my printer? How can I get people to help me do what I need to do to be compliant with all of the regulations? I think probably that's enough on me. It just gives you a little bit of a background. I'd like now to turn to Alex and ask Alex to provide a little bit of a background on himself and Sprint Law. Alex, over to you.
Thanks, Dino. Hi, everybody. It's nice to be here. As Dino mentioned, I am the founder, proprietor of a legal firm called Sprint Law. We've been around for about 5 years. We specialize in providing legal services to small businesses and startup companies, often people just getting started or getting started with their business for the first time, all the way through to sort of businesses that may grow and become a little bit larger. My background as a lawyer began working as a commercial and technology-focused lawyer at Clayton Utz, which is one of the sort of larger law firms. I was there for about 5 or 6 years, and then saw this opportunity to help much smaller companies and ended up launching Sprint Law back in 2017. I am both a lawyer and I guess an entrepreneur as well, as the person that started this firm. So I've kind of been on the journey of starting a business and growing it. And Sprint Law has grown quite a lot in the last 5 years. We do pretty much everything online, which is a feature of our business model. So we've grown from a sort of small team to now I think we have about 55 or 56 staff, and we're in Australia and the UK, and basically provide online legal support to, I think, a bit over 5,000 clients now. So it's grown quite a lot, and it's been quite a journey. But it's been definitely very rewarding to be helping so many small companies. So yeah, that's a bit about me.
That's great, Alex. I love the online element that we're all getting used to dealing with pretty much everything online these days.
Yeah, particularly since COVID, for sure.
Yeah. So Amanda, public speaker, coach, author, can you give us a couple of minutes on Amanda Heal and where you're at now?
Oh, yes. And I apologize for not having my camera on. I seem to be having issues with it. Anyway, yes, my name's Amanda Heal. I have been blind since birth, and I practiced as a nurse for 17 years, government lawyer. And then I was suddenly made redundant, started a couple of businesses. I sold skincare for a while, through network marketing, and then I did a little bit, I retrained as the John C. Maxwell speaker, trainer and coach. I did a little bit of coaching for a while. I wrote 2 books, and now I'm sort of pivoted into keynote speaking.
Wow, that's quite a journey, Amanda. Fantastic. Thanks for that.
Interesting.
Yes. So Alex, let's dive into the subject matter of tonight's discussion. So some of the basic, predominantly legal issues in setting up a business. So I'm an entrepreneur. I've got this really great idea. I know it's going to be a success. And I'm just starting out. I don't want to be sitting on disability support pension. I want to be out there contributing to society and making something of this good idea. Why should I be thinking about legal issues as the starting point?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think we're lucky or somewhat unlucky to have three lawyers sitting on this virtual call at the moment, because if you ask a lawyer, what are the legal things I need to think about? You ask 3 lawyers, you probably get 3 different answers, and you probably end up with a long list of scary things that might make you question whether you want to start a business at all. I think one thing I would just say at the outset is, legals. There's many reasons you might want to think about legal things, but the fundamental one is about risk management. It's about protecting yourself if things go wrong in the business. Now, like anything, when it comes to risk, there are a million things you can do to protect yourself, and there's a million ways you can use the legal system and contracts and other sorts of legal instruments to provide yourself with protection. But the reality is, when you're just getting started, you may not have the budget, the time, or the need to protect against all the risks. And so I think it's an important part of understanding. When you're speaking to a lawyer, you're trying to understand, well, what are the risks? What are specifically the legal risks that might occur in this idea, in this business that I have? And how can I prevent them? Or if I'm not going to be able to prevent them, at least I'm aware of them so I know what they are. So I think that's a good way to think about, legals generally. Now, it's not just all about risk. People use legal instruments like contracts as a way of, getting a good deal or confirming the terms of a deal. Legal is also important as a box ticking exercise. Sometimes for regulatory purposes or compliance purposes, there are certain things you need to have done to even start a business and so on. So those elements are important too. But I think risk is really the kind of key thing that you're looking for. And it's really about finding out those unknown unknowns. So what are the things in my business model that I don't know about, and can a lawyer help me identify them and make sure I'm protected against them?
So protective, sort of like a big doona to wrap ourselves around with.
very good way of looking at it. Exactly. Law is an enormous doona.
New jurisprudence being created as we speak. All right. So as a person who is blind or has low vision, and I'm got this idea that I want to develop, should I be starting with thinking about a structure to wrap around it, a company, a trust, a Liechtenstein vehicle, or should I just say, okay, look, I've got this idea, I should start and do it all in my own name?
Yeah, great question. I think, the number one thing, you've got an idea, you want to start a business, you want to think about is what business structure or registration structure am I going to use through which to operate my business? And, in Australia, there is a requirement that if you are conducting some sort of business or commercial operation, you need to be registered to do so, unless it's a hobby or a side project sort of thing. And when you're selecting the registration type, there are a few different options. The three most common options that people are choosing between are registering as what's called a sole trader, registering as a partnership, or registering as a company structure. If you're starting a not-for-profit or a charity of some description, there are a few other structures: incorporated associations, companies limited by guarantee, a few other more complicated structures, which are reserved for those types of businesses. If you are, thinking about trusts and sorts of things, there's some more complex versions of structures that you can use. But for most people just getting started out, they'll start with either the sole trader, the partnership, or the company structure and sort of evolve from there. The main difference between the three is as follows. A sole trader is a quick, easy, simple registration. It's free, it's instant, and it enables you basically to register like an Australian business number or an ABN for you personally to conduct business. And once you have that, you register the ABN. That's basically all you need to tick a box to go out and start providing services or goods to people. If you sort of get that registration, you don't have to, but if you get an ABN as a sole trader, you can register what's called a business name, and that would be attached to your ABN. So let's say I, Alex Solo, the individual, wanted to start a business that sold flowers online called Flowers Online Australia. I would, and I wanted to start it as a sole trader, I would go online. I could register for free an ABN number, a 9-digit number, might be 92745, whatever it is. And then I would register for $30. I could register a business name called, Flowers Online Australia or whatever it was. And I would be good to go and start sort of conducting business. There's a bit more to it, but that's the basic idea of a sole trader, and it's a very good structure for people just looking to get started. A partnership structure is sort of similar to a sole trader structure, but it's when you're working with more than one person. So if you have a business partner or a couple of business partners, you can all register together as a group as a partnership. A partnership is essentially like a group of individuals all working together, in their personal capacity, but as a group to provide services or goods to the public. Again, you can get an ABN for your partnership. You can register a business name for your partnership. And typically you'd also have a contract or a partnership agreement between partners. The third structure is the company structure. And this is for sort of more serious businesses, and generally the ones that the structure most lawyers would recommend you look at setting up as your business becomes more serious, or if there's high risk attached. And the company structure is quite different to the other two. It involves setting up a new thing, a new entity, what lawyers call a new legal person, called a company. The company is really like a separate person from you as an individual. It's got its own name. It can open its own bank accounts. It can enter into contracts with people. And what's really beneficial about that is, from a legal perspective, is the company structure provides you with risk protection. So it means that if something goes wrong in your business, but you're operating through a company, a customer tries to sue you or you suffer some sort of loss, it means the customers are able to come after the company structure and the company's bank accounts, but it can't affect you as an individual. You have what's called limited liability through the company. And so one of the big advantages of that, if you're doing something risky, if you have that company structure in place, it's sort of like a shield between you and all the things that can go wrong with the business and your sort of personal life. Whereas in the partnership or the sole trader structure, if something goes wrong, there's not actually a big divide between your business and yourself. And if a customer decides to sue you, potentially your personal assets are at risk. So that's a bit of a taste of some of the different structures. There's obviously more to it, and always good to speak to a lawyer when you're getting set up. But yeah, hopefully that answers your question, Dino.
That's great. So I presume there's a bit of a cost differential in all of those structures. The sole trader and partnership are pretty low cost, but the company starts to add a bit more.
Yeah. So rough numbers, a sole trader, you can register yourself for free, and the business name costs $30. So I mean, you might want to engage in assistance, but all in all, it can cost as little as $30. Partnership is the same, free to register, $30 for a business name. You may get a partnership agreement if you have multiple partners, and a lawyer would normally charge. I mean, Sprint Law, we charge about $1,000 to do a partnership agreement. Other law firms may charge a little more. And then a company structure, you've got to pay $500 to ASIC, and you just to get it registered, and usually another $500 to a service provider on top. So that's $1,000 to get registered, and then you're paying a renewal fee of about $200 each year. So it can be a little expensive if you want to go down the company route. And oftentimes people will start off as a sole trader because it's nice and cheap. And as the business grows a little, they'll convert to the company structure. The only thing I would say if you decide to go down that route is every day that you're set up on the sole trader structure, you're kind of at risk of things going wrong. So the longer that you don't set up a company, if the business starts doing well, the greater at risk you are. And so it's often good to get insurance, at least if you're going to be a sole trader, some kind of protection. Otherwise, looking to move to the company when you can afford it.
Hey, Amanda, I should bring you in at this stage. In your experience, what have you set up for your business?
Well, I'm a sole trader for a number of reasons. One, because I started off in skincare. So, that was very low risk and wanted to keep things as simple as possible. Wasn't really earning very much income. So, needed a really cheap setup cost, but really wanted an ABN because I thought I was going to sort of become more successful and that I would at some stage need to be, paying tax on my income and, claiming GST back and things like that. So I set up as a sole trader, but certainly when my speaking career takes off, and I will then change to a company for those reasons that Alex mentioned, or a partnership potentially.
Great, that's fantastic, Amanda. Alex,
all the websites and everything, ASIC's website and all that are really quite accessible. So it's very easy to get an ABN number and register a business name. And
you did that yourself?
I did.
Amanda? Yeah, that's great. Good to know. So, Alex, I'm an entrepreneur. I've got some family and friends who are willing to support me financially as I start this business off. What should I be thinking of next? What with those supporters? Is there anything I should be doing with them?
Yeah, so I mean, if people want to put money into your business, there's a few different ways you want to think about how that works. I mean, one is it could just be a donation and they donate to the business. And you may just want to have something in writing recording the fact that they donated to the business, whether it's a donation agreement or some written record that it happened. It may be something they can claim as a tax write-off if it's an eligible donation. And in any case, you may just want to record, the details of how the money was given, so it's all clear in future in case there's any doubt about how the money was provided. A second option is it could be a loan. Businesses often start with a loan, either what we call a private loan from family and friends, or in certain circumstances, a bank loan. The private loan approach, if you get a loan from family and friends, you just want to think about what is the repayment rate, repayment period. Are you paying interest on the loan? Is it, they're going to give you $10,000 with you'll pay them back $12,000 in 12 months time, or when the business takes off, or how does all that work? So it may be a loan. Or the third is it could be an investment or an equity investment where they own a part of the business or they're entitled to some of the profits in the business. If you have a company structure, they would become what's called a shareholder, where they may actually own a percentage. And then if the business, turns profit after 2 years and makes some amount of money, they may receive a portion of those profits in line with their percentage, if that makes sense. So those are a few different ways you can do things. Another idea, which is becoming more popular, is using crowdfunding, where you could basically put up an idea for your business on a crowdfunding website. And you may say, look, I'm starting this business. Here's what I want to achieve. And you can accept donations through a crowdfunding website, but often instead of just accepting sort of pure donations out of the goodness of people's hearts, you can provide them with some kind of benefit or some kind of upfront product. So let's say you were again starting this flowers online business example that I used before. You haven't started the business yet, but you want to give people flowers online. You could say, hey, crowdfund my flowers online business, and I will give you, half price, 10 sets of flowers delivered to your house if you invest this much with the business. And that's a good way to actually get new customers and receive funding up front. So often a way that sort of smaller businesses get their financing off the ground without too much trouble. So yeah, those are a few different ways you might want to think about it.
So the idea is to before we get to the crowdfunding, is to get some certainty about what the relationship is with those people, so that when your business becomes successful, you know exactly where you stand with them. Is that it's
very important. I think as soon as money gets involved, you just want to have some type of written agreement or written record of exactly what they get for their money and how it works, even if it is just given in good faith. Disputes can come later. Even if someone gives you money and it's not recorded in writing, they can say, well, actually, when I gave you that money, I own half of your business and it's mine now. And so oftentimes you would have what we call a investment agreement between the investors and the company. If it's a donation, that's a donation investment agreement. If it's a sort of share investment, it's called a subscription agreement. And then you may have something called a shareholders agreement as well. But some written agreement which gives everybody certainty as to what the relationship is between the people putting in the money and the business afterwards. I think that's what lawyers would recommend. And again, this is all about risk. So in the future, if there's any doubt, it's all there in writing.
Makes sense, especially if what you've created becomes the next Facebook or something like that, and you're worth a squillion. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. So my business is up and running, Alex. So I've got some funding, either crowdfunding or from friends and family. I've started doing whatever I'm doing, either providing a service or selling goods. What do I need to do to ensure that my business is compliant with legal regulations in the place where I'm doing my business?
Great question. I mean, there's a few different areas of regulation that you want to be thinking about. The first is what I would call like all industry regulation. Doesn't matter what type of business you are, you've got to comply with these regulations. And there's a few things that fall into that category. The first we've already touched on, which is this general requirement to make sure that your organization is registered if you're out there providing goods and services to the public. So you need to have that sole trader, partnership, company, whatever it is, an ABN number of some description. You generally need to have if it's becoming a legitimate sort of business activity. So that's one thing. And if you don't have that in place, you may be breaching some regulations and there could be fines and penalties issued. So that's number one. Number two, there's another law called the Australian Consumer Laws, which is a set of laws that applies to basically any business that's providing goods or services to consumers. And consumers are kind of quite broadly defined in this legislation to actually apply to small businesses as well. So if you're running a business that services consumers or other small businesses, generally you're going to have to comply with this Australian Consumer Law regulation. And that regulation is a series of protections that you must comply with for the consumers or your customers to make sure that they're basically not taken advantage of or ripped off in the way that you provide goods or services. And a few protections that your customers will have against you, which you got to be aware of are, first of all, they have the right to get what they paid for. They have the right to not be misled into purchasing something different to what they reasonably understood they were purchasing. They've got the right, if they've paid for something and it doesn't appear to be what they thought they were buying, to seek a replacement or a refund if that hasn't occurred. And they've got the right, to not sign up to certain unfair contract terms where they can't get out of agreements with you and things like that. And so it's worth being aware of those things, because in your business, you just want to make sure that you're being clear and transparent in the services that you provide, that if customers are seeking refunds because they didn't understand how things worked, that you're complying with the laws when you're providing it to them, and just making sure that in the way you run your business, you're not breaching those Australian consumer laws. Again, there's sort of fines and penalties and things like that if you're not compliant with them. In addition to those kind of two Australian consumer laws and just general registration requirements, there's other sorts of regulations that apply to specific industries. So, for example, I operate in the legal industry, and we've got the legal regulator, the Law Society and the Legal Profession Board, which have a whole bunch of additional regulations. If you want to start a legal business, you must comply with X, Y, Z requirements. And so when we set up a law firm, not only do we have to register our business and have to comply with the Australian consumer laws, we also have to meet a whole bunch of industry-specific regulation requirements. And so depending on what industry that you're in, if you're doing something in health, or you're doing something that involves products, or you're doing something for children, or you're doing something in some different category, there may be industry-specific regulations as well that affect the way that you run your business. So I can't kind of run through all of them, because obviously it depends on what industry you're in, but it is just worth turning your mind to that fact. When you're starting a business, you have an idea, you should be thinking, okay, well, I'm going to have to get registered. I'm going to have to make sure that I, have a way of providing my services that's consistent with the Australian consumer laws. And then what are the other regulations that might be out there that apply to me in my industry? And normally you can sort of ask other people who are running similar businesses if they know what regulations may apply. If you look online, government websites are generally helpful in identifying that. And pretty much every industry has some type of regulator. Like I said, the legal industry, it's the legal regulator. They usually have a helpline, and they're quite helpful in explaining what those regulations are. So, there's more to say on that, but I'd say that's probably the high level way of thinking about compliance and regulations.
Yeah, that's great. So business bodies and things, they're a good source of information on that.
Yeah.
Whatever particular business you're in. Amanda, the various iterations of your businesses, from skincare to public speaking to coaching, how have you managed to keep an eye on compliance and what regulations apply to you?
Yes, so I was very fortunate to be able to be I was trying to apply for a government grant, and I stumbled across the National Employment Incentive Scheme, which it was this awesome thing where for free I was able to do a certificate in small business startup, and they handheld us through. There were lots of small businesses, including mine, and they handheld us through all that process of looking at the different things that we had to comply with. In the skincare industry, there wasn't really anything like formally written down. I had to behave in a certain way because of the company. But when I went into coaching and speaking, even though I didn't join the bodies, the International Coach Federation or the Australian Professional Speakers Association, I still hold myself accountable to their codes of conduct. So that's what keeps me, I guess. That's what I'm complying with. And they also took us through all those regulations. Are you working from home, and do you what OH&S kind of things do you need to think about? Do you have the right sort of chair, or is everything electrically tested to make sure you're all safe? And do you have things in place to protect your customers' information? Like, do you have antivirus things on your computer? Do you have firewalls set up? Well, those sorts of things. So it was a really awesome course to do, and it was all online.
Maybe Optus should have attended that course.
Yeah, maybe. Yes. So very, very eye-opening, really.
Yeah, sounds
great. Yeah, and they even took us through getting business insurance. What sort of insurance do you need? In fact, we had to tick all those boxes in order to pass and get the certificate. So, yeah, it was really, really good. I highly recommend it. National Employment Incentive Scheme.
Fantastic, Amanda. Thank you, Alex. So, coming back to some of the legal issues. So, my business is chugging along. I've got some great suppliers. and customers that have helped me reach a reasonable amount of turnover. Should I be looking to put some contracts in place, or can I just rely on the goodwill of people to someone who is an entrepreneur who is blind or has low vision?
Yeah, excellent question, and one that I think a lot of entrepreneurs, really struggle to put their sort of contracts in order early on. They think they can just do handshake deals and hope everything will be okay. I think if you speak to pretty much any lawyer, they're going to strongly suggest that you get some sort of contract in place with your customers, with your service providers, with your suppliers. These are going to do many things. First of all, they're going to lock in your ability to receive revenue or payments from your customers. They're going to set out the terms of your engagement, the rights for you to potentially terminate the arrangement with your customers. And they're going to sort of really secure your revenue streams and the way that you operate your business. Second of all, they're going to provide liability protection. So if something goes wrong with a customer or a supplier, you want to be in a situation where you're protected from risk. They can't potentially sue you for damages or sue you for loss. And even if 95% of customers, 99% of customers have goodwill and aren't going to make a mountain out of a molehill, all it takes is one customer, one thing to go wrong, and the longer you exist, the more likely that is to happen for them to decide they're going to make a claim against you or sue you for some sort of damage, and then you're going to wish you had a contract in place. So there's kind of two high-level types of contract that you want to be thinking about in any kind of small business. The one is that customer agreement. What is the relationship between you and your customers? And is there a contract they sign or terms and conditions they accept, or something which they agree to at the time of engaging you? And then on the supply side, who is providing you with services? Who do you rely on to do what you do? Using the example of the flowers online shop. By the way, this is a new example of mine, so apologies if it breaks down at some point. I just came up with it 15 minutes ago, but someone is presumably in flowers online in this store. Someone's providing you with the flowers. Now, you may make them yourself, or maybe you have a wholesaler that you buy flowers from and then you deliver them to your customers. So your customers are the people that buy flowers on your website, and the suppliers are the people that give you the flowers to on-sell to your customers. So you can imagine it's Christmas time or it's Valentine's Day. You've got thousands of orders if your business is doing well, on your website for flowers, and your supplier decides that they're not going to give you any flowers, and they cause your business all kinds of loss and all kinds of issues. You may want a contract in place which says, well, I've just lost a lot of reputation. I've lost a lot of customers because you haven't delivered my flowers as we agreed. As per the contract, you have to compensate me in some way. So these are the two types of agreements that you might want to have. And a lot of what Sprint Law do is actually write these contracts up for our customers, which is these customer and supplier agreements.
Generally, do you find that those supplier or agreements are you tend to get them shoved, as a small business owner, you tend to get them shoved down your throat because your suppliers are generally bigger and more powerful than you?
It depends. It depends on who it depends on who your suppliers are. Like if one of your suppliers might be, Microsoft Office or whatever, or Zoom, like if you're using video chat, and Zoom has its terms and conditions, which is its customer contract. Zoom's not going to accept any negotiations to its terms and conditions from a small business. But if you are, in that flower example, there's another small wholesaler who you're relying on, who's another small business. They might be open to discussion and negotiation. I would say, though, you're right, Dino, like more often than not with small businesses, we do a lot of customer contracts and less supplier agreements, because oftentimes the suppliers are big and you just have to take it or leave it, sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Amanda, how have you drafted contracts?
I have. In my legal career, I certainly looked over a number of contracts and advised people on them. But in my business career, I confess I actually got one offline or off the internet, but it was from an Australian firm. I can't remember who it was. But yeah, so I used to enter into coaching agreements with my clients. And they were things like, okay, I have to provide you with services of a certain quality, and comply with certain sort of, levels of conduct and keep your information private and all that stuff. But in turn, you have to turn up when you said you would. And, if you cancel your appointment with less than 24 hours notice, then, I'm not going to give you your money back and I might still charge you for it. But as a speaker, I haven't got into those contracts yet because I haven't had anyone pay me to speak yet. Hint, if anyone knows, if anyone who wants to encourage speaker. So that they would be all about, how much you would pay me and what I would deliver and when and where and such. So, but I use a online platform called 17 Hats, and I was working with a Facebook coach and I entered into an agreement with her, similar to the coaching agreement I was talking about. And I absolutely loved it because she sent me this email and I just, sorry, dog playing with her toy. She sent me this lovely accessible email, which I clicked on the link and then I ticked a box to say, yes, I accepted her quote for services. And then I ticked another box saying, yes, I signed the contract, and I typed in my name and hit submit. And then I ticked another box to say, yes, I'll pay the invoice. And it was also accessible. And I thought, wow, this is great. So, and I asked her what it was, and she said it was called 17 Hats. And so I invested in it myself. And so all the back end of it is accessible, and all the front end is also accessible. So
that's great. We love stuff that's accessible these days. There's so much stuff that's simply not. But they're all sort of standard terms that you don't have any ability to amend or change.
I did have a choice of what terms to put into my contract.
Right.
As any sort of speaker or coach would, but there are certainly standard terms in there that you'd be crazy to not have in there.
Great. All right, thanks, Amanda. So, Alex, so my business is up and running. I've got contracts in place. I look around and what I've developed over time is, I think, my good idea, which is really the cornerstone of my business, I really want to protect it. What should I be doing to try and give myself some sort of control over this good idea?
Yeah, so I think this is where kind of intellectual property comes in, and the idea that, no pun intended, you may want to find certain mechanisms or legal mechanisms to protect your business, to protect the concept behind your business, and to protect the unique creations that you come up with in your business. And unique creations may be inventions that you make, but they don't necessarily have to be. They may be, your brand, your processes, your systems, the way that you do things. The documents or guides you give customers, your approach, or whatever it is that makes up your business model that may be recorded in some sort of series of documents or processes. So all of this stuff is the domain of sort of intellectual property, and where that comes in is there's sort of three or four types, depending on how technical you want to be as a lawyer, of intellectual property that small businesses kind of want to think about. The first is what we call trademarks. So trademarks are registrations that you can make that give you the exclusive right to use a brand name or a logo or a phrase, which you register in an industry and a particular geography as well. So for example, Sprint Law, we've registered the word Sprint Law and our logo for Sprint Law, and our kind of key phrase, which is business legals means made simple. We've trademarked each of those sort of phrases and names and things in Australia and in a couple of other countries, and in the legal class or legal industry, which is in Australia considered class 42, the legal industry. So what that means is we have the exclusive right as a trademark holder for a 10-year period to use the word Sprint Law and our logo and that phrase in association with legal goods and services, and no one else can use that name, phrase, or logo. Not only can they not use that name, phrase, or logo, they can't use anything deceptively similar to it. So Sprint Legal or Sprint Lawyer, those kinds of things are also protected. We own that in the legal space, and that's a registration that you do in Australia with IP Australia. You put an application to own a trademark. You specify what industry and how long you want to register it for. And then if you're successful, you have the right. It actually takes about 7 months or more to get fully registered, but if you're successful, you have the exclusive rights to it. So I generally recommend to anyone who's got a business name they want to protect, go through the process of trademarking it. It does cost a little bit. With lawyers, it'll cost about $950. There's ways to do it cheaper where you can do it for as little as sort of $350. But very important to make sure you own your brand if you're going to be building that up and investing in it. So that's one type of intellectual property. The second type is copyright, which people may have heard of. So copyright refers to sort of any original work that's recorded in material form, which is a sort of lawyerly definition. But what that means is if you create something original, which hasn't been created before, and you record it in some sort of material form, it could be a document, an audio recording, and it doesn't have to be physical, it can be digital. If you create something original which hasn't been made before and recorded in material form, the second that it's created, you don't need to register it anyway. The second that thing is created, provided it's original and it's in material form, that is owned by you, the author, as copyright. And that means if somebody else tries to copy that thing, and you can show they took it from your thing and they used more than a small part of it, they used a substantial part of it, you can potentially sort of sue them or have a claim against them for copyright infringement. So copyright protects, in the arts, it protects things like books or movies or it protects music and these sorts of things, because those are original works recorded in some kind of material form. In a business context, it will protect your business documents, your systems, your processes. If you have a website, the code in your website, the designs of your website, all of these sorts of things are protected by copyright. And so you want to make sure that you own all that stuff. If you created it, it's yours. If you paid someone to create stuff like that for your business, you want to have a contract with them called a copyright assignment agreement where they transfer it to you. But that's kind of how you protect copyright, either through transfer agreements or just sort of keeping track of what you've created. And then the other types of intellectual property, I said sort of 3.5 types. There's patents or patents, depending on whether you're English or American, but those protect really like inventions that are pushing forward human progress. So there's a very high threshold to get something registered as a patent. They are things like, the COVID vaccines, are the kinds of things that will be patented, or some sort of robot that does something incredible. Those things are very difficult to get registered, but if you can get a patent registered and you show that you've created an actual invention that pushes forward society in some way, you can get 20-year exclusive rights to it. No one can use that technology or invention without paying you some money. So small businesses, it's quite rare to have patents unless they're in high tech. And, of our 5,000 clients, probably only 5 or 6 have successfully gotten a patent. So it's not super common, but worth being aware of. And then the final sort of 0.5 type of intellectual property, in legal terms, it's not really property, but we advise small businesses to sort of think of it through the same lens, are these things called non-disclosure agreements or confidentiality. And these can be quite useful when you've got an idea for a business or you've got a concept. You haven't yet done the work of coming up with a name for it or recording it in material form in some way. You don't have a system or process. You just have a concept and you want to talk to people about it, but you don't want them to steal it. So what you can do is just get them to sign a short contract called a non-disclosure agreement, which basically says, I'm going to tell you some things you can't tell anyone. And if you do, you'll be breaching this agreement. And it's another good way of protecting these ideas from being disclosed. It's not really property per se, it's just a contract, but it's a good way to kind of protect those ideas of yours that might not fall into the other categories. So yeah, that's a little bit of a helicopter summary of intellectual property.
That's great, Alex. As we don't have a non-disclosure agreement in place at the moment, I'm getting straight on to online and trademarking Flowers Online Australia, because that sounds like a really good idea.
Love it.
Just in the last couple of minutes, I'd like to think about, my business is blossoming, it's growing. I've got a great set of customers. I'm now at the stage where I need to bring some employees in to really help it grow even further and faster. What should I be thinking about? Just a couple of minutes on that, Alex, if you can.
Yeah, I think if you're hiring employees, first of all, well done. You're probably doing pretty well. And the second thing I'd say is, there's a few different things to consider. First of all, it's the regulations. So we already talked about a few types of regulations. So the industry-specific regulations, the Australian consumer laws, and then those registration regulations. When employees get involved, you have another set of regulations. These are the Australian employment laws. There's kind of two levels of them. We have the national minimum employment standards, which basically say that if you're hiring an employee, they're entitled to certain basic rights. They're entitled to, if they're a permanent employee, a certain amount of annual leave, sick leave, personal leave, carers leave. They're entitled to work in a safe, hazard-free environment. And they're entitled to be told of their rights, and they're entitled to reasonable notice periods if you want to terminate them, and so on. So you also have to pay for both casual and permanent employees superannuation. And at the moment it's 10.5%, I think, of what you're paying someone has to go into their nominated superannuation account. So those are kind of the main requirements across all industries. And then again, for employees in certain industries, we have these things called awards or modern awards, which, unlike the name suggests, they're not happy certificates that you get, but rather they're like industry-specific minimum standards. So again, using the example legal industry, in the legal industry, we have the Legal Services Award, and it's a set of regulations which basically say that if you're a business in the legal industry employing legal staff, you must ensure that they get a certain amount of overtime pay, they get a certain amount of notice before their shifts are rostered, that if they're doing these kinds of duties, they'll have this kind of pay rate, and so on, and quite prescriptive requirements, in fact, for what you can pay staff in certain industries. And there's many types of awards for different industries. There's the fast food award for the fast food industry. There's the health workers award, I think, for the health sector. So if you're employing staff, you just want to know, okay, am I complying with the overall regulations? And then am I also complying with the industry specific regulations? Again, being those awards. And then finally, you just want to make sure you have a contract in place with your employee, which we call an employment contract. And this is going to be the document that, again, sets out what their job is, ticks all the boxes of those regulations, and explains, what happens if things don't go well, how could you end their employment, and what their other rights are, as well as covering things like intellectual property ownership. You want to make sure you own all of their copyright that they create, and confidentiality. You want to make sure that they're not stealing all your ideas and taking them off and starting their own business. So in summary, get the contract in place for employees, and also make sure you know about all the regulations and you're ticking all those boxes.
Yeah, that sounds really valuable, Alex. That's been fantastic. Thank you very much. I know we wanted to leave some time for questions. Have there been any questions sent in so far?
I do have a question. Are there any tax benefits for being a company as opposed to being a sole trader?
At least I'll deal with the tax issues, because obviously companies have got a fixed rate of tax, and that varies upon whether it's a small business or a larger business. But it's mid-20s. I should know the rate, but I don't. 30% is the maximum rate of tax. So it depends how much money you're making, because individuals have got a graduated rate of tax. So the more money you make, the higher the rate of tax you pay. So it's a matter of looking at the business and then deciding whether or not the additional costs of running the business weigh up against the sort of potential tax benefit. And then also the points that Alex mentioned before about legal protection, because you've got a division between yourself and the operating entity. So, but then, in many cases, you end up with having to give personal guarantees on loans and things. So, you're left in a position where you've got pretty much a similar position. But it's a matter of sitting down and looking at the business and saying, okay, am I making enough to justify moving it into a company structure?
I was just wondering, your discussion about the crowdfunding thing I'm particularly interested in, because we're looking at trying to do that with the business that my son and I are getting involved with. Is the benefit of going through a crowdfunding organisation that separates from the legal liability if something goes wrong or you don't get enough money? How does all that work?
Yeah, happy to talk a little bit about that. I think, Peter, every crowdfunding platform has its own kind of terms and conditions and different ways of dealing with things. I think in Australia, and this could be outdated because I'm not super across the current platforms, but Kickstarter and Possible were at least a few years ago the two most common platforms. First of all, you get access to their big pool of potential crowdfundees. They'll promote it on the platform, and everyone that goes to their site will see your business. And so there's a lot more people that could potentially invest in it, or it's not really investing, but more backing it through crowdfunding. So that's one advantage of using the platform. The other is they have their own terms and conditions attached to them. And they take care of a lot of the legal stuff because they do it so frequently. So you may not even need to see a lawyer if you use them. I mean, if you've got questions, you may still want to consult one, but they have their own kind of template terms for how to accept donations and so on. And usually the way those systems work is you'll set a target. If you don't hit it, everyone gets their money back, so you don't actually get any of the funds. Once the funds come through, you'll make some representations about what you'll do with it. Now, if you crowdfund all the money and don't use it in the way that you said you would, donatees may be able to make claims against you and so on. And the platform's terms and conditions generally say, it's all your problem. We're not going to be liable. You just got to do what you said. But generally, these things are kind of quite community driven. And as long as you roughly keep to what you say you do, and they help you write out exactly what your donations and rewards are, the process can be quite straightforward. And generally, it's quite successful. Like we've seen a lot of clients get off the ground with it without too much problems and without too much cost either. So if you're interested in it, I'd encourage you to just go to the relevant websites and speak to the team there, and they can help you through. Yeah.
They just take a percentage of the funds raised. Is that how they?
Correct. They take a percentage of the funds raised. Exactly. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you, Alex. Now we have time for possibly one more question. I had one sent through, a question for Amanda. Amanda, they want to know, are you an NDIS participant? And if so, do you use any NDIS supports to assist you with your business?
I am an NDIS participant. Yes, I haven't up until now used funding to assist me in my business, but as it happens, I'm actually in the process of applying for funding for equipment, a braille note taker, which will help me in my presenting. And the reason I went through NDIS is because I couldn't get job access funding because I couldn't show them that I was earning so many thousands of dollars a year. So I have to go through NDIS funding for that.
Great. Okay. And another question for Amanda. Amanda, how did you decide on your business name?
A lot of prayer, a lot of soul searching. I initially started off with my name, Amanda Hill, as my business name. Then I decided when I was doing coaching, I wanted to call myself Purpose, Vision, Future, because I believe that everyone has a life purpose, and that's what my books are about. And you need to have a vision of that to give yourself a good future. So that's how I came up with Purpose, Vision, Future. And I'm still keeping that business name for possibly podcasts and other bits and pieces, but I've decided to go back to my name for the speaking side of my business.
Make a comment about domain names. How important it is to get a domain name sorted before you set up your business.
Absolutely.
I had that problem because I had a podcast called the Do What You Love podcast, and someone else in Canada had a podcast called Do What You Love podcast. And so when you said to your smart speaker, play the Do What You Love podcast, it would play hers and not mine. Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. That's all we have time for. I'll hand over now to Nicole. If anyone else had further questions, you can email them to bca@bca.org.au. Over to you, Nicole.
Thanks, Christina. So a very big thank you to all of our guests this evening. We look forward to our next webinar, Business and Assistive Technology, featuring Talking Tech's David Woodbridge and Elise Lonsdale from Data Australasia, discussing the latest assistive technology tools and tech for people who are blind or vision impaired to power their businesses. In addition, we have a special offer from Bill Lang, Director of Small Business Australia. Bill has generously offered a small number of free 12-month subscriptions to Business Advantage Online for business owners who are blind or vision impaired, allowing unlimited access to an online community for networking and resources Webinars, training, advice and support valued at $500. Contact Christina at bca@bca.org.au to take advantage of this fantastic offer. Finally, additional information and resources are available at an Eye for Business page at eyetothefuture.com.au, including a podcast series with many more stories from successful business owners who are blind or vision impaired to inspire and motivate you on your business ownership journey. We hope you will join us again for the remaining webinars in the Entrepreneurial Mindset series. Thank you and good evening.